Welcome to r/Malicious Compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story. Client wanted me to repair his car faster. The owner of the car is angry with the result and calls the police. The second story. I was hired for the position of C# developer, although I was not a C# expert. The third story. Sally lied and stated she required a salt-free diet. She's defeated and miserable when forced to eat salt-free food. The first story is, want me to rush the work? Okay, pay double and wait longer. Just some background info. I own a body and paint shop in a city with lower cost of living than the surrounding cities. Because of this, my prices are more reasonable than some other shops in the surrounding areas. Also, I'm very picky when it comes to my work, and have the mindset that regardless of what my customers are paying, within reason, I will take extra steps to make sure the end result is up to my standards, and I always include warranty on my work. As a result of this, most of my customers are referred to me from the other more expensive cities around, because they want quality work at a lower price. My prices are not cheap, but they are lower in comparison to more high-end shops in more expensive areas for the same quality work. This has usually been a win-win for me and my customers. Now for the MC. I had a guy call me and ask the usual questions, and he agreed to bring his vehicle down to my shop so I could inspect it and give him a quote. The following day, he brings his vehicle down to my shop, and I immediately realized that the vehicle has been previously painted. Experienced painters can usually tell. In this case, it was obviously not done correctly, as the paint was already beginning to fail. He wanted to do a full restoration of the vehicle to factory condition, and I explained to him that due to the fact that the vehicle had been repainted before, there could be a chance that the time frame or price could change, depending on what's underneath the paint, once I start sanding. For example, improper bodywork or prep work done by the previous painter. I also tell him that if I do find any issues, that I'll run them by him before continuing to make sure it still fits within his budget. We agree to the terms, and a rough time frame of 3 to 4 weeks, so long as there are no surprises. He leaves a deposit and I begin work on his truck. 3 days later, I have the bed removed, as well as the front end, doors and interior, leaving the truck as basically a skeleton, and I start sanding the parts. After I start sanding and I get through the paint layers, I see that there's some previous body filler on the panels, which is normal on older cars, especially when they've been repainted, and most of the time it's no biggie when the previous repairs are done properly, meaning the body filler should never exceed 1/8 of an inch thick. But I quickly find out that the cab of the truck had a pretty severe impact before, which the previous body shop had not pulled out before doing body work, and the panel had a full 1.5 inch of body filler. I stopped what I was doing and called up the owner to let him know. After discussing it and sending him a video of the issues, we agreed to adding an extra 2 weeks to the time frame and additional repair costs, and I began the proper repairs. About 2 weeks into the original drop of date, I get a call from the owner of the truck, and he tells me that he needs the truck to be done by the following week because he has a buyer for it and he doesn't want to wait any longer. At this point, I have the truck completely torn apart and have only finished the bodywork on the cab and front end and just started the repairs on the bed and doors, and that we had agreed to an additional 2 weeks on top of the original time frame, which still had not come yet, for a total of 5 to 6 weeks. I explained to him that it would not be possible for me to get all the remaining work done within a week without me having to hire more people, which would add to the cost of the job. He followed up by saying that he would not pay a penny more, that if his truck was not done by that date, that he would be at my shop with a tow truck and law enforcement to take it, and he wouldn't pay the remaining balance. Now I knew that he would not be able to get away without paying the balance, and that law enforcement would back that up, as in my state, I'm allowed to place a lien on any vehicle that has a balance on labor already performed, and agreed to by the customer, which he had. Now for the malicious compliance. At this point, the customer has begun making threats and insults, so I tell them I would get the truck done on SE conditions. The warranty would be void. I would not be responsible for any previous work done to the truck that may fail, and the outstanding balance would be paid in full on the day of pickup, and that the job would be considered complete. He agreed to the terms and told me to do what I had to make sure it was done. I proceeded to finish the repairs I had started, still doing them the way I should, but for the remaining parts I simply sanded the paint a bit and proceeded to paint the truck. Sure enough, the paint showed issues immediately, but the truck was finished on time. The owner comes to pick up his truck and is livid at the results and proceeded to call the police because he did not want to pay. The police arrived and I showed them the paperwork he signed, as well as all the text messages backing my explanation. The cops then tell him that unless he pays the balance, he'd be forced to leave the truck and pay storage fees until it was. He reluctantly paid the balance and proceeded to take the truck to another shop, which the truck sat at for an additional 4 months, and he had to pay almost double the price I was charging to have them redo some of the work. The parts I took my time on before the whole issue arose were left alone. The next story is, if it's a C# developer you want, it's a C# developer you'll get. This is the story of how I got hired at an old job I had a few years ago. The technical manager, who ultimately became my boss, was a great guy and was the one who embarked on a course of malicious compliance to get what he wanted. It happened like this. The company was small, about 20 people, and run by a CEO who knew the company's industry, but didn't know anything about technology. What she knew was that she had a team of 5 developers and 1 technical manager, and that the company's code was written in the programming language called C#, pronounced C#. One day, her favorite member of the development team quit, whom she regarded as their foremost expert on C#. To the technical manager, this was an enormous opportunity. He had 4 other developers who knew C#, but what he was missing was an expert in database design and administration. The company processed a huge volume of data, and he knew enough about databases to know that theirs were a mess. The same data had to be recorded in multiple places and was always getting out of sync. Operations that should have taken a few seconds would run for minutes, etc. He didn't want to replace the departed employee with another developer. He wanted a database expert, but the CEO wouldn't hear of it. Cue malicious compliance. Somehow, he got a description of the person he actually wanted into the hands of a recruiter, who found me. I had over 10 years of experience in database development and administration at that point, but had never touched a line of C# code in my life. The technical manager had a skills assessment he was giving to all candidates for the job, which was 100% database questions. There was a huge bold-faced warning at the top, which I found extremely odd, stating, "These questions are extremely difficult. It's unlikely you'll be able to answer them all. You may not be able to answer any. Do not feel any pressure to attempt questions you find too difficult, as these results are not related to the position." I was told I had 20 minutes to work on it. Well, I finished it in about 2 to 3 minutes. The questions were all actually very easy, and walked back into the office of the technical manager to ask if I was missing something and what this was all about. He gave me the shush gesture and motioned me back into the conference room. Then he explained. His office was adjacent to the CEO's office, so he couldn't talk in there. The warning was something he'd been forced to put on the test after a recruiter, who apparently had initially been just as confused as I was, had called the CEO to ask why they were giving a database assessment for a C# position. He'd had to play it off to the CEO as, "Well, wouldn't it be good to know if we happen to find a C# developer who's comfortable with databases too?" He explained all the backstory described above, and then we talked for about 30 minutes about databases. C# didn't come up. The job sounded really interesting, and would be a chance for me to make an enormous positive difference. At the end he said, "Okay, you're perfect. I'm going to recommend you for the position, but first you have to talk to the CEO. Remember, when you talk to her, you're a C# expert. Got it?" I was worried, but I thought, worst case I get caught and don't get the job. Best case, I can really help this company. Into the CEO's office I went. After an exchange of pleasantries, she said, "So what would you say is your #1 technical strength?" I made a thoughtful face and said, "Well, it's hard to say. I have skills in a lot of different areas, but if I had to pick one, I'd say probably C# programming." Her face lit up. "Ah, fantastic," she said. "That's exactly what we're looking for." That night I stopped on the way home and bought a book about C#. I think it was literally called something like Learn C# in 14 days. By the time I started 2 weeks later, I knew enough C# to do my job. As the technical manager had said, there was an enormous amount of database redesign to do, so the C# programming was maybe 10 to 20% of my time. I was able to get those database jobs down from minutes to seconds like they should have been, and the CEO was so impressed, she never even questioned my background. I continued to learn C# on the job, and no one ever found out I hadn't been a C# expert all along. The last story is, my meal must be salt-free. This story is from a dinner party I hosted before the pandemic. I invited 6 folks, and shortly after the invites were sent, I received a call from Sally. Sally, not her real name, advised me that she was now on a salt-free diet due to medical reasons. She advised that at home she cooked without any salt, and gave me a speech about how wonderful salt-free life was. I was skeptical, and advised her that I would personally find it difficult to give up all salt. Was she sure she wasn't just on a low-sodium diet? Sally advised that unless her dish was salt-free, she wouldn't be attending. While telling her no was an option, I'm not that person. See my previous malicious compliance. I was peeved off at Sally for years of being difficult at the dinner table in restaurants. Trust me, there was always something wrong with her meal, or its preparation, or the flavor, or the waiter, or... With a smile so large you could hear it through the phone, I assured her that her request for salt-free was 100% going to be accommodated. On the dinner night I prepped the meal, Sally was getting the same thing as everything else, with one critical difference. All of her food was prepped in separate containers, baked on separate racks, and seasoned with exactly the same flavors, sans salt. Dinner time and my guests arrive. I have all of Sally's food plated on white plates. Everyone else gets gray plates. First round, appetizers. Fried calamari with a lemon jalapeno butter sauce. This dish typically has salt in both the batter and the sauce. As Sally couldn't have that, I battered her calamari in salt-free seasonings and flours. Her condiment looked exactly the same, but was made with unsalted butter and no added salt. I placed Sally's plate in front of her first, and she immediately states she asked for salt-free. I assure her that her dish is salt-free, and I made sure to cook hers separate and even used a different colored plate to keep it straight. We all sit to talk and enjoy the squid. Sally takes a bite and makes a face. "Mine has no flavor," she exclaims. All my other guests tell Sally it's divine, delicious, best they've had, etc. I smile at Sally and assure her that her dish was flavored exactly as everyone else. The only difference is that she received absolutely no salt. It's at this point that Sally has a moment of clarity. It's painfully obvious on her face. She realizes she can't complain about the lack of salt, as she's already told the table about her salt-free life. She also can't claim it tastes terrible if everyone else is raving about the food. She literally looks like she was about to cry at the table. As my guests enjoy their dinner, Sally is slowly doing the toddler plays with her food, munching, pushing her calamari around the plate. After a few moments, she reaches for the sauce that I made for everyone else. "Sally, be careful. The salt-free sauce is in the white bowl. That one has sauce." She mumbles something about wanting to taste the difference before literally dumping the bowl on her calamari. She then exclaims how much better it tasted. You and I know that, of course, things taste better with salt. So this drama repeated itself over the main course of honey-roasted salmon with pine nuts. I also am no heathen and had both salt and pepper on the table for my guests. I'm not going to judge you for needing more flavor. Here we go. Sally takes a bite of her fish and once again realizes that it has no salt. She reaches for the salt shaker and conversation stops. Another guest asks Sally if she was okay with adding salt to her food. She says that she can occasionally have salt. She proceeds to shower her fish with salt sprinkles. I also baked some cookies for dessert. The dough uses a little salt. I made sure to whip up a separate batch of cookies wrapped to go for her. Salt-free, of course. When I handed her those cookies, the look of defeat that hit her face warmed my heart. Dinner's over. Everyone's happy except for Sally. I called her the next week to make sure she was okay, as she's consumed sodium at my party. Sally told me her doctor has removed her sodium restrictions, and she won't need that accommodation at future meals. On the phone, I congratulate her for her good health. When I hang up, I laugh until my sides hurt. Salt-free life apparently doesn't taste good when the salt is actually omitted. Thank you for subscribing and all the likes. Have a good one.